talk about Jackson State that has, a 60 seat stadium with, 30,000 plus fans that see their games regularly over the years, and especially now with Coach Prime being on board. So, yeah, there is a unique difference with Howard, but I think in some ways that's Washington, D.C. You have the Mecca, the brand of Howard that really goes a long way that can allow them still to get some talent that most people wouldn't think twice that they would be able to get.
Mm. And then what I was saying is that if they're and how it's prominent in a lot of different ways, and what you said makes a lot of sense. But if there was a situation where it was L.A. State, and I didn't have everything up, and yet I got this kid coming in, and he's gonna attract this type of attention and a positive, then you really get into the dynamics of, can the program handle the kid, and if the program has the facilities to handle the kid, because you've been around, the schools, we don't have to say all of it, that they're not living up to the expectations, but they want their student athletes to live up to those expectations, and that's an issue. The fact that if you don't have the weight room for these kids to play football or track or anything else, then what are we doing here? What are we really doing here, Doc?
Yeah, I think it's a fair question when you talk about the facility rates, but I think sometimes we also overanalyze that. Kids go to institutions for so many different reasons that it's hard to try to pinpoint and say that you just got to do this and then the kids will come. I mean, some kids are serious about the relationships they can make in the institution. Some parents have the financial windfall where it's more about them continuing a legacy. They went to Howard, so they want their kids to go to Howard. That football is not a main thing for their family, that they're more about the academic experience. And it's hard to argue anything about Howard or some of the other HBCU programs. Some people want to be close to home. They don't want to go outside of that area. They are really close with their family, and they want their family to be able to see them. So I think one thing that we have to be careful about is pigeonholing what recruiting is about, because that's what we see. Many people have many different reasons why they go to an institution because of the program that institution may offer, whether they are getting scholarships for maybe the next 5 FBS programs, which oftentimes don't have the best facilities either. So some people want to play at the FBS regardless. Some folks will be like, I like the idea of being able to go to HBCU and playing these big classic games, or have a chance to go to the Celebration Bowl. So there's so many different indications that we almost have to interview each kid individually and find out what was really the decision. And unless you can really have a good conversation, you still may not get out of it then. And so, there's kids that had a bad experience at one institution that says, I want to go to this institution because my cultural experience at this institution, whether it was coach, the environment, or what they heard negative from folks, they might just want to get away from it. So they transfer to a different institution, right? So there's really a lot of different reasons for us to try to put a cap and a pin exactly how all this makes sense or doesn't make sense.
And it's funny because having not going to an HBCU, I have a friend that went to Norfolk State, and he had a bad experience in terms of counselors and different things. And then I quote unquote that, now they want money in terms of alum. And he said he won't send his kids there. And that's your point. I mean, he had a bad experience. He may send his kids, he said, to another HBCU, but it won't be Norfolk State. And I'm not picking folks on Norfolk State. I'm just saying, I ain't saying no. I'm just saying this particular person I know that said, hey, that's what happened at that particular program. Doesn't mean that particular program. We love the Spartans here on the program. Talking with Dr. Kenyatta Cavill, prominent voice on business and leadership, as you can hear, on HBCUs and universities, and specializes on HBCU sports sports culture paradigm professor at Texas Southern University. He's an author of our early athletic experiences at HBCUs, the creation of conferences, and president of the THE agency inside the HBCU Sports Lab, which I want to get to right now, Doc, and your top 10s, your majors and mid-majors. And we had exchanged emails, and I was telling you about like our top 10s, mid-majors and majors, kind of same. If Jackson State was off, I don't penalize a team that was idle. You're idle, teams above you lost, then you should move up. And I think that's what happened in your case. Alabama and A&M kind of playing down. I think Alabama and A&M, for me, Doc, they play up to competition and play down to mid-majors. That's what it seems like it's been for the last 3 or 4 years with this program. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. And then when you look at Prairie View and some of the other teams that moved up, certainly it's just a matter of you look at strength of schedule and everything else. But I want you to go over your top 10 and then talk about in your majors, and then talk about some of the moves and some maybe surprising moves that you had in your top 10 and the major poll.
Yeah, when you look at the major poll, listed out real quick for those that may have not seen it. I have at number 10, Tennessee State. At number 9, Grambling State. Number 8, Southern Jaguars. At number 7, you have Alcorn State Braves. Finish out the bottom 5 at number 6 is North Carolina A&T State Aggies. Top 5 programs are FAMU, Florida A&M Rattlers, Norfolk State Spartans that we just talked about a little bit there. Number 3, Alabama A&M Bulldogs, as you said, with 2 first-place votes. Can play up and play down to the competition oftentimes. At number 2, you have Prairie A&M Panthers, who's starting off with a great season, 5 first-place votes, 4-1, really making a statement last Thursday on television against Arkansas Pine Bluff. You knew they could do offensively, but now they have a defense that seems to go with it, meaning the number 1 team taking over the number 1 spot after Alabama A&M drops 2 spots is Jackson State Tigers with 6 first-place votes. They're currently at 3-1, 1-0. Some of the movement that you alluded to in the poll was that change in the top 3 spots. Alabama A&M fell 2 spots. They fell below Prairie A&M. That was because of the big win that I spoke about, Alabama A&M. But they were able to hold off Norfolk State that stayed at number 4. But you did have some movement with 5 and 6, which were FAMU and A&T. Both of those teams moved up 3 spots respectively, previously from 8 and 9, while Alcorn State, which was idle, dropped 2 spots. So one of the questions that some people had were about Southern that also dropped 2 spots from 5 and 6 the previous week to now 7 and 8. And one of the things that was unique in this poll with Alabama State and Arkansas Pine Bluff dropping out, in the analysis I did, which is a poll ranking along with people voting in the poll, was the fact that if you look closely, Jackson State has now defeated a top 5 program in FAMU, which was a top 5 program at the time they played them and beat them, and they're still a top 5 program that seems to be looking better. They also got a win over now a top 10 program, which is Tennessee State. Top 10 team when they played them, because Tennessee State beat Grambling, and Grambling, after their big win, has jumped in the top 10. So that gives you some indication that while Alabama A&M has that big win to open up the season against South Carolina State, and I think that win later on the season will resonate more as South Carolina State starts playing in some MEAC games, and I believe that they'll win those games. Then you'll get a little more respectability. But right now, with South Carolina State just being 1-4, that win is not as impressive as it looked at the time when they got it. So those are some of the things that I look at in the poll when I do the poll ranking system. And then that's also some of the things that I tell people to consider when they send in their votes of ranking teams.
You know, Doc, a couple of teams there. South Carolina State, I agree with you. I think, and by the way, the MEAC had a really good weekend against the SWAC. I mean, they really did. It almost sort of like a back slapping the face type of with Bethune and Fam. losing, and Hampton losing to uh, um, Norfolk State and stuff. So like the previous teams losing to the current SWAC MEAC teams, I thought it was a good weekend for the MEAC. But
Yeah, to your point, the MEAC went 4-2 this weekend.
right.
They got a big win over Big South, which was Norfolk State over Hampton, a rivalry game as you spoke about. They also had the game with South Carolina State, I should say, beating a previous member in Bethune-Cookman and now the member of the SWAC. And so those are big wins. And then they got 2 wins over Northeastern Conference members, with Howard getting a big win. So those were some of the big wins. They did have the tough loss with North Carolina Central losing on a touchdown at the last second and the point after, losing the Valley for Mississippi Valley State's homecoming. So they ultimately went 4-2, but that's a good record. Now you have the SWAC and the MEAC at 2-2 on the season, splitting, but you have the deciding factor, which is the 5th and final game until the Celebration Bowl, with South Carolina State traveling to FAMU this weekend. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But to your point, yes, MEAC had a great weekend in terms of going 4-2 overall. They were just an extra point or a second stop to actually going 5-1 and sweeping the SWAC in the weekend. But it was not the case. So it's 2-2 on the season.
Two teams I was wondering about, and what your theory in terms of your sports lab with A&T moving up as much as they did, and Tennessee State. I would have had probably South Carolina State, and even with their record, I would have probably had them in the top 10. I'm not sure about Tennessee State, but talk about Tennessee State and A&T in particular. A&T, I think you said in your poll, went up 4 spots, and I was just surprised at that.
Yeah, they went up 3 spots, but yeah, right there in that. But it was a combination between some teams losing below them and the fact that they had a big win. Although it was a team that was winless, not playing very well, but they did what they were supposed to do, and they really beat up on their team. Like you said, you had a couple of other teams that were either idle that weekend or lost. So the combination of 2 can have you jump up a couple of spots, especially early in the season. As we get to the second half of the season, we're kind of at the midway mark, especially after this weekend of games. So you can give what I call, and we'll look at this Sunday, is we'll talk about giving our midterm of grades, as we talk about in the lab. When you talk about the professors coming in there, just pun certainly intended, we'll do that. But as you get to the back end of the season, and you do away with these non-conference games, these FBS games, you'll start to see some teams kind of float to where they're supposed to be. And you'll get in October, which we call these separation Saturdays, separation month. And so you get to see the cream start to rise to the top, and you will get less volatility in the poll rankings as you do early in the season.
I did get a question real quick. It kind of says, some old-fashioned trash talking for a match today. Connor made a requesting whether Jackson State head coach Deion Sanders will send him an Aflac scooter, led to suggestions that the Alabama A&M coach was engaging in trash talk ahead of the team's anticipated matchup. He did mention something about, this big.
Yeah, there's a couple of things like that. That's where the media, and I'm not saying us because we are involved in this, but some of the other media that doesn't really understand the culture, certainly doesn't understand the history. They can take those things in different ways than what we've seen it. Anybody knows Maynard, he's always outspoken.
Always.
That's nothing new. He's always done this from back in the day. Much like we see Deion Sanders being outspoken in terms of what he thinks. There's another coach that does that. The second thing, that this was done before the start of the media day. The coaches were kind of going back and forth. They were talking about that Alabama State, Bethune-Cookman had been taken to the woodshed, and they were just talking in banter and lightly. And I think in some ways the media kind of took advantage of that and took that information. So I wanted to put that out there because in some centers, obviously everything tends to be on the media these days, but I think it's professional to let somebody know that you're going to take the recording, and can you record it? Because you also often hear those that have been in the business longer, they'll ask, can this be recorded? Can I use this? But that's also a learning lesson for Maynard. We can always learn about that situation. But I like it in terms of the culture. You see this at the Power Five all the time between the SEC, and people just talk about this as banner, and people may have some woes me, but for the most part, they like it. It's entertainment. It gives up the ratings. It's going to have a lot more interest. Obviously, Jackson State fans in general may feel a little different about it because this is what it is. You sport for your team, and you're not happy when somebody doesn't say the gracious things to your team. Just like I'm sure the Alabama fans, they loved it because they ready to come in and whoop up on the Tigers. But it's going to draw more eyeballs if possible, because a lot of people had this tuned in anyway. So I see it as just pure entertainment, good thing for the sport, no big deal. We make things bigger than what they're supposed to at times. And again, not saying us, but we're part of it. But those that are really trying to make something out of nothing do that oftentimes.
And Coach Maynard, come on, he always running his mouth. He's and I've covered him for a long time, and some people will go, well, no, Coach Maynard he's going to keep it real, and he's going to say these things. We know these are his quotes. He does this all the time, Doc, as you know. So it's not even a big deal. A big shout out to AD Drew, our friend at the Black College Sports Media and HBCU Pro Sports Media Association, checking you out, Doc. All right, so we go to the mid-major. I'm with you.
Before you get into the mid-major, we did have somebody listen here, Mark Lee, that put some comments that are a little bit off of the sports marketing side, but I talk about the academic side of this. And so, yes, he's referring to the budget cuts that came out. Digging deeper in that, and that certainly is something for HBCUs is quite frustrating. HBCUs over the year have never gotten the financial leveling, if you would, of the playing field we ever do. So it is very concerning and frustrating. We'll see if there's some backdoor money that's going to be there. But in terms of what we see, that is a significant cut. And HBCUs will have some issues of trying to deal with cuts when they need that. Everything can't be on the back of endowments. There is a history that follows this that precludes the fact that we have that endowment money. And Mark Lee is exactly correct when he made that framework about the history part of this. So that's where we need to make sure if we're in this game that we're calling those folks associated with buying it. And no matter whether we thought how much it may help, we need to voice our concern and our frustration about what's taking place here. And now on to the mid-major poll.
And I was going to say, to your point, Doc, it's not a Democratic or Republican thing. I mean, these cut, we've seen it. So folks listening and watching, if you're people of color and think it's all Europeans or whatever, that's not the case, because HBCUs have been dealing with this and having to add these, as you know, Doc, at Texas Southern, dealing with these and adding these particular cuts or surpluses, lack thereof, in their budgets all the time. So to your point, it's really a big concern. It's a big thing that they have to deal with on a regular level. So with the mid majors, I think my top five was your top five. I mean, again, when you look at whether they played or not, I mean, undefeateds or undefeateds, but when it gets down to that bottom five, it gets a little tricky for me. I think Fayetteville stayed a little higher in my poll. Certainly, I do like Fort Valley State a little higher in the poll, but you bring back the top 10 and what went into it in your mid-major.
Certainly. Let's go through it real quick so people get it, and then we'll break it down. At number 10, you have Bluefield State that just restarted their program. They're finding a way to get it done. 2 consecutive wins. They were off this week because the teams dropped out this week in terms of Benedict Tigers, Kentucky State Thoroughbreds, and Miles Golden Bears. You have a couple of teams jumping into the poll, which starts at number 10 with Bluefield State. You have Allen Yellow Jackets, 3-2 on the season. They're also a program that has recently brought football and just recently got into the SIAC. They're still in their probational period, but they've had some big wins this year, surprising a lot of folks. They jumped back into the poll after a week hiatus. At number 8, you have Shaw Bears, 3-2. They were not ranked, so those are the 3 teams that jumped in the poll that were not ranked. At number 7, you have Fort Valley State Wildcats that you speak about, and I would agree that they could be a little higher, but I have them jumping up 2 spots, previously being at the 9th spot this week. Rounding out the bottom 5 is Fayetteville State Broncos at number 6. They stay at number 6, and I can see also why you would have them a little higher. But I have the Lane Dragons. I see the SIAC stronger than the CIAA, especially the CIAA Southern Division with several teams with winless records. One of the indications why Lane is able to get it early. And as you said, the top 5 of the mid-major poll are real consistent. So you'll see this as redundant. These teams did not have any move, but they continue to win and get it done. They'll start playing each other, so it'll be interesting to see if we get some movement in the next couple of weeks. At number 4, you have Albany State Rams, Golden Rams, I should say, with 4 places of votes. They are one above the Lane Dragons we just spoke about, bringing us to number 3. Savannah State Tigers at 4-1, 2-0, remain at the 3rd spot. At number 2, Bowie State Bulldogs, 4 first-place votes. The Bulldogs are 4-1, 2-0 at number 2. Number 1 ranking is Langston Lions, 6 first-place votes, 5-0, the only undefeated team in HBCU football at this time. They are pounding their opponents in the NAIA. Do not necessarily get the love they should, but this is a very good program. They are young, so they will only get better, so it'll be fascinating to watch what they do. I know a lot of people really like with Bowie State or the Albany State Golden Rams, but I see it as Langston getting it done in terms of the way they are beating up on teams compared to the other teams. I do think they are a threat to potentially get jumped in the next couple of weeks just because of the strength of schedule of some of these top 5 programs. For example, Bowie State Bulldogs have a big game this weekend with Shawan. We just talked about what Shawan did to Winston-Salem State. So that can go a long way in terms of the Northern Division. And then you have a matchup between Fayetteville State and Shaw, top 10 matchup that I'm very interested in. As Shaw tries to show that they are the real deal and finally take that step over Fayetteville State that has ruled the roost in the Southern Division for the last couple of years, hadn't been able to get the championship because of Bowie State. But is there a changing of guard? We will see this weekend.
You know, a couple quick things, quick answers in our 2-minute warning. With when you look at Bowie State, they lose to Shawan. They drop out of top 5. If they close, are they still in top 5?
If they lose a close one, I can see them still in the top 5. But again, it's going to have to do with what the top 5 programs do. You know, if Langston, Savannah State, and Albany State continue to win, what about Fayetteville State? They do play a top 10 team. If they get the win over Shaw, it would mean to me that they would go up lane. So I could see Bowie State maybe falling slightly out of the top 5 to number 6, depending on what those teams. But I can also see if it's a close loss and the other teams also have close wins, then you can see maybe the data and people voting could keep Bowie State in the top 5 and don't move up Fayetteville State. But I think it's one of those things that you got to see what everybody does this weekend. Great question. I like that.
Langston and Lane, strength of schedule. If they lose, how far do they drop?
I think they can drop quite a bit because of the strength of schedule, as I said, especially if the other teams continue to win. It's going to be hard for them to fall amongst those teams that are winning, that have 2-3 game win streaks against very solid competition, particularly if you're looking at those teams in the West Division of the SIC, where it seems to be loaded. I mean, you have Allen in the poll, even though they're not eligible for the championship, but you have Savannah State, Albany State, Fort Valley State over there doing well. Benedict dropped out, but they're still a tough team. So you have a lot of teams in that SIC West that are playing really good football. So depending on them teams playing each other, if they can keep winning, it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. But yes, I can see Langston dropping quite a bit, as well as Lane, because they are in the East Division, and the East Division is not quite as strong this weekend, so they have to continue to win. But I'm looking for a surprise as that Lane and Miles get it on in a couple of weeks. That would be interesting. And Lane will have a chance to make a real statement.
Yeah, I like Miles, and I know they lost in the 2 and 3, but I still like that program. Final question for you: Fayetteville State and Fort Valley State. Fort Valley State in a very, very tough SIAC conference. Fayetteville State seems like they're Fayetteville State. Like they've been showing that they're probably going to be in that championship game, barring some some other situation. Why the numbers, like I said, I thought they'd be a little higher. Why were they at based on your lab?
Yeah, as I said, I could see why you would push Fayetteville State up a little bit. But in my considerations, the thing that made it challenging to move Fayetteville State up too much higher is, as you just alluded to, the strength of schedule. They play in a very weak CIAA South, and so they've been able to take advantage of it. Again, they have a chance to make a statement this weekend. They play Shaw, which is a top 10 team. Shaw at number 8. So this is a game they really need, not only for the division, but also to make a statement to see if they can push up a little bit in the rankings. But all in all, that's why they're just outside of the top 5, is because of who they played earlier this season.
Yeah. Doc, before you go, and I appreciate your time, your patience too, staying on as long as you have, let people know how they can follow you, get your top 10s and all of that, sir.
Certainly. You can follow me at Inside HBCU Sports Lab, and that's with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. We do a show every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 to 7. We also do a wrap-up show on Sunday to tell you what all happened this weekend. That's at 9 o'clock. And all of those times are Central Standard Time. So you check me out there. You can go to the website, thgagency.com, and look up Black College Sports. You can get information there. Follow me on the social media platforms, and you can get all kinds of great information. That is Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, DrKenyatta-Cavil. That's DrKenyatta-Cavil. Or just Google up Inside the HBCU Sports Lab, and you can get all the information you want. That's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab 1 on Twitter. Follow us, like us, subscribe us on YouTube so we can get this information to the people. Or look out, I'm on the LA Batchelor show every so often. I know he tries to get me on here, and I'd like to do it even more, but the schedule has to work out. But when we come, we bring it hot and heavy, because some of the best questions I get are from Mr. LA Batchelor, as he does it with the Batchelor News radio show every week, multiple times a week. And so check us out right here, because great information. He checks out the polls, so he might sneak some information in there. And then when I get a chance to come on, I'll break it down for all the people there. And we will chime in when you have little things in the chat. We'll see if we can get some of that grind in as well.
Absolutely. And Doc, like I said, I mean, and I've said this to you off the air before. It's very few people I know that understand on and off the field and sports and student athletes, the economics and the paradigm of all of that when it comes to HBCUs and beyond. And you're one of those. So thank you so very much. You do what you do, and I appreciate you. We'll get you on hopefully next week. Looking good, as always, sir. Much more than I am. So anyway, but I appreciate you, Doc. Thank you, bro. I appreciate you, man.
All right, no problem. Thank you. Have a great one.
Yes, sir. Dr. Kenyatta Cavil here on the Batchelor News radio show. If you missed any part of our programs, make sure you go to our website, thebatchelornews.airtime.pro, thebatchelornews.airtime.pro. Coming up at 6:30, we'll be on StreamYard and everything. Check your listings there. You can follow us on Facebook at Pad Nation. Twitter at PadNation2, that's a number 2, Instagram LA Batchelor, and you can get all the downloads at the BatchelorNews.airtime.pro, Batchelor with a T, and all the local downloads, Spotify, iTunes, Intune, and of course IBM-TV. Thank you to Mark Lee for doing this bad boy as always. Enjoy. We'll be back if you're on our list 6:30 Eastern. This evening. Enjoy, and we will talk to you very